Professor Buraphat Sangthong from one of our neighbors. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about the retained hemothorax, to drain or not to drain. So not so much about stopping the bleed, but more about how to evacuate the bleed. And he is a trauma surgeon and former head of trauma at the Prince of Songkla University. He has worked in Australia, in Westmead, in Los Angeles County, and in Southern California. And he's also part of the trauma surgery subcommittee of Royal College of Surgeons in Thailand, and certainly helps a lot with postgraduate training as well at the Prince of Songkla University. Prof. Buraphat.
Good evening, everyone. And Sawadee krap. That is how we say hello in Thai. So before I start, I would love to bring you a greeting. This is the country I call home. At this time, there's no tourists anymore. So very pleasant, and would love to invite all of you here, to welcome all of you, probably after this COVID pandemic. It would be lovely if we could enjoy discussion on site, but with this webinar, it's still fine. It's still fine. One good news, I just realized that at least in Australia, there's a travel bubble with New Zealand. And I just heard that Thailand, even though in the third surge of the COVID-19, we are about to open border with Malaysia and probably Singapore. So we'd love to looking forward to see that. And just back to the assigned topic about the retained hemothorax. So I would love to start with a case. So what would you do if you got an elderly gentleman who sustained blood level fall, but pressure seemed to be stable at this stage? And chest X-ray show, as you can see here, white out on the left chest. Perhaps you don't need this kind of CT scan to confirm that hemothorax. So what should we do? It's pretty straightforward, right? Most of us would put a chest tube in, and after a chest tube produce less output, we will pull it out. But after that, after we pull the chest tube out, and if for some reason you got the patient got CT scan, and this is what you got: small amount of fluid in the chest, which high heart fluid unit, which probably retained hemothorax. What should we do? Well, some of us, when you got this kind of CAT scan, you may choose to observe the patient if there is no symptom. Some of us may just put a chest tube in. Some may select to put a pigtail catheter in, or some will do the VAT, the videoscopic assisted thoracoscopic drainage. Or some may just need some more information and then make decision later on. Some of us still could not decide how to do next. And if you go to literature, the East guideline just published last year, and you will see that for the retained hemothorax, let's say less than a small amount of hemothorax that's seen on the CT scan, it's pretty hard to make decisions based on evidence base that we do have. And that's when I got this information and be told by Dr. Shoemaker to discuss this at this webinar, I smiled because it seemed to be very interesting to looking at this data and see how do we do that. So with the short talk, I will cover why we need to drain blood from the chest cavity. And if all the data just make us more confused, what should we do in my view? Let's start with the first one. Why do we need to drain blood from the chest cavity? Well, if there is symptom, that's very clear, right? But we know that since we were in medical school, if we leave blood in the pleural cavity. It may lead to fibrothorax. It may trap the lung and will cause less expansion. And also the blood may become infected and develop empyema thoracis. So this is a problem that we learned since we were in medical school. And that reminds me nearly 2 decades ago when I served as an international trauma fellow under Captain Wee when he was at the Navy Trauma Training Center in Los Angeles. What I remember about Dr. Wee was that he always skeptic about everything, about all the dogma, about the authority. But with a hemothorax, it's quite surprised because he said that we just need to drain it. We got training to drain it. We don't know if we leave it, what will happen to the patient. So at that time, for any hemothorax that we see other trauma, for the retained one, we will drain it anyway. That's 2 decades ago. And if we look at the East guideline, the Eastern Association for the Surgery of Trauma guideline, in that period, a decade ago, all hemothoraces, needless to say, what any size, it should be drained because of those 2 concerns, the empyema and the fibrothorax. That makes sense, probably because at those day and age, we diagnose a retained hemothorax mostly by chest X-ray and sometimes with CT scan, and it's quite straightforward to drain those blood because if we leave it, it may lead to complication, as I just mentioned to you. But time really passed by, as you may see it here. We got into the CT scan era in which we scan people more and more. Even in middle-income country, just like in Thailand, we scan people more and more. And now we start to see that some patient which with asymptomatic and got some a little bit white on the chest X-ray on the left-hand side, and we see a small amount of hemothorax. And then we got to ask ourselves, do we need to drain that as we were taught in medical school? Why people start to doubt on the need of to drain the small hemothorax? I think that the Joe Du Bois need to receive some credit because why people, some of people that start to do some silent revolution on the dogma of just drain all the blood in the chest cavity. The Du Bois start asking and ask at least 20 trauma centers, mostly in North America, some in South America, to take part and to answer the question, what do they do at that time for the retained hemothorax? Because at that time, the current guideline is drain every hemothorax. And what they get that around 1/3 has wax, around 1/3, as you may see it here, around 1/3 has just been observed. And with at what observation, the success rate is very, very high, at around 80%. And they did some kind of statistic to find which patient may be of benefit of observation, which factor that may predict successful observation. And they got they got number of the volume of the retained hemothorax. If it's less than 300 ml, the chance of success is 4 times comparing those who have bigger hemothorax. Then that's which statistic significant. For those who are not familiar with how to measure or how to estimate the volume of hemothorax, this is if you Google, you will see that there are many formula for the estimation. However, this is the one that is quite valid. It's been validated by a number of studies. So basically, you measure the depth at the greatest depth of the hemothorax on the CT scan and measure the length of the hemothorax. As you may see it here, just measure the length and the depth, and then you put it into the formula to get the idea of how big of the hemothorax is. With that information, that sometimes perhaps we can just leave recent hemothorax if it is asymptomatic in the patient and no need to drain. At least there are two big studies published recently on perhaps if we don't drain it, there will not be a problem. And I will share with you two large studies that try to convince us that perhaps we do not need to drain hemothorax all the time. The first one comes from the Calgary group. They have quite a significant number of patients with a hemothorax. And despite the fact that it's a retrospective study, but at least they found that comparing to those having chest tilt, those have chest tilt have a higher risk of empyema. That's quite straightforward, right? Because having chest tilt, the bacteria may get into the pleural cavity. But with chest tilt, in patient with small hemothorax, perhaps you chop the patient length of stay because the patient get blood bleeding out and be discharged home early on. Another interesting study that I would love to share with you and perhaps deserve your time here is when Mark Moya was in Boston and he collected the data and presents at the AST, and they found that quite different from the group from Canada, showing that those with it seems that those with chest tilt have no difference in complication in terms of empyema, but they can send patient home early on without chest tilt. Basically, those who have a small hemothorax can be sent home quite safe. And we have a chance to have a close look at our data as well, at our local experience. And one of our residents did a study and found that despite the fact that we are quite conservative, we try to drain hemothorax in every case, but at least those who have hemothorax less than 1.1 centimeter may be safe. Those who have bigger than 1.1 centimeter may not safe enough, and we tend to put a chest tilt or a pigtail catheter in for those who have a bigger one. So what should we do with all this data? Those data, I believe, despite the fact that they try to answer the question, they have some limitation because all of them are retrospective in nature. And we are aware of there's some bias on that. There are no standardized protocol, and the reason to put a chest tilt in. So at this stage, what should we do? Either observation or chest tilt, pigtail, or wax, or depends. And even when we have a closer look at the study by the AST, in which if we look at the small number of hemothorax, small amount of hemothorax, let's say less than 300 ml, which seem to be the same. If we look at the R-square, for those who are familiar with statistics, we know that with the R-square of 0.06, looking at this statistical model, it will explain the outcome only 6%. So not that very good. So when we are in doubt with all the data that's still conflicting, what should we do? I believe we love to have something that very certain, so we can do something good for the patient. But sometimes we need to face the world that is uncertain. And in fact, it leaves us some freedom. As some philosophers put it, We are condemned to be free. So we have a freedom to choose which option would be of benefit to the patient. But to be free to choose what option to be good for the patient, we have to be responsible for all those options as well. And that's what I just would like to share on the retail hemothorax, and would like to thank for the privilege to share with you. Thank you.